Hey everyone, happy Monday. So, we're just winging it today. We don't have any notes. We didn't do hardly any research. But there's a reason for that. So, Tara and Erin, you guys know Erin. She's been on the podcast multiple times, Tara's best friend. We all met over the weekend and we were just kind of having like a heart to heart. And it totally was not really what I was expecting, but I think a lot came to the forefront. And, it started with like, why are we doing this? Why did we start doing this? Um, and for me, after the 2020 election, I was like so outraged and I just had like so much that I was just like holding in, had no one to really talk about it with. That was when people were getting canceled left and right. And I was like, this is bullshit. And I want to like just scream. I want to like talk about this. And that's when you and I sort of like met a couple years into that. And the second I realized that you and I were on the same page, I feel like we just had this like instant connection. And I'm like, I just have to do this with you. I just kind of interjected in your idea. I'm like telling you to do a podcast. And then I was like, I want to do it too. And I think in the back of my mind, it was more like thinking about this next election and just putting my foot down and being like, I'm not going to let the same bullshit happen. And I want to get the truth out there. I want to, like, if I could make an impact and if I could use my voice to reach other people, then that's what I want to do. And I don't know if that's where you were at with starting it, but that's kind of like what was in the back of my mind, at least subconsciously.
Yeah, I mean, we've talked about this before. The idea of doing a podcast was completely like frightening and foreign to me. And all I wanted to do was write blog articles. And the opportunity to do this with you was like, okay, if I'm doing this with someone else, then I'll do it because I really wanted to speak out. It's one of the reasons I left law enforcement in the first place. And I basically gave up a career that I loved so that I could be vocal about how I felt about what was going on in our country. And we've now been doing this for over 2 years. But when we started, our goal was like waking up the American people, the mainstream Americans, to understand what's really going on in our country. And like the more we started doing it, the more I realized it was so much crazier than I even thought it was. And when we did like deep dives into stuff that, are supposedly conspiracy theories and all this shit is actually valid and true. And the more we uncovered, the more outspoken I wanted to be, and the more I loved doing this podcast. And we are now what? The election's tomorrow. And I don't know that we really planned beyond getting people to get out there and vote. Like the whole purpose of this was wake up, understand what's going on in our country, and let's all do what we can to save it, make America great again. This is what we need to do and pay attention to and get out there and vote. And we've been pushing the vote thing, and now that's tomorrow. And so where do we go from here?
Yeah, and that's the thing. It's like it was this far away thing, that felt like it was never going to get here, and now it's here. And I think it started because Aaron had asked like kind of like what our purpose was with the podcast, and I was like, well, I think that was my goal, was just to like reach as many people as possible before the next election and wake them up to the bullshit. But like you said, it's like once we started digging into things and learning, it's just like so mind blowing. And I think once you wake up to it, there's no going back.
Right.
And so it's like, sometimes I wish like I could just go back to when I was completely unaware, blissfully unaware of all the corruption and like the crazy stuff. But you can't, like, you can't go back. And so now I'm still like so hungry for knowledge. And when I hear stuff, I like get outraged. I'm like, everyone should know about this. And so I think for me, it was like thinking about the election and just thinking on the off chance that Kamala wins, Like, am I going to have the wherewithal to keep doing this? Because I am so burnt out when it comes to Kamala and just like the bullshit of left-wing politics.
Right.
And that's where I'm just like have this sense of dread, but at the same time, I every atom of my being is telling me Trump's gonna win. And if he does, like great. But if he doesn't, it's like, oh my God, I can't keep talking about Kamala. It's driving me crazy.
I know there are times where, I mean, we do a lot of research for this podcast. We really do. And there are times where like our Friday episode will air, and then I'll be like, thank God, I'm not going to look at anything over the weekend. And I'm not even going to think about politics until Sunday night because it is a fucking heavy topic. And after talking about it pretty much almost daily, we're looking at news and information and stuff on social media. And it's empowering and yet completely depressing at the same time. And so, yeah, that it requires a balance. And just the last, what, 6 months alone have been so insane ever since, you know, Biden was conveniently gotten rid of and this whole coup occurred with putting Kamala in place. I've just felt like it's so unbelievable, everything that's happened, that it's not even just normal politics at this point. It's just sheer craziness. And it just escalates by the day. And now we're like on the cusp of finally finding out what's going to happen next. And I didn't even look at anything this morning. I didn't want to see what the polls were saying. I didn't want to know the, last minute campaigns that they're both doing. I'm like, let's just fucking get it over with already.
Yeah. I think it was like maybe a month ago, and I kind of took a little bit of a break from looking at it like all the time. And I remember we were texting and you were like, what should we do an episode on? And I was like, honestly, I don't know because I have not looked at anything and I have not been this happy in a long time. Like it was like I hate even saying the word mental health because I feel like people have just
True.
twisted that word, but it's like it was taking a toll on me. And I felt so good not looking at it, like taking a little bit of a break from it. And if people knew like the amount of time and effort we put in to every episode, I mean, we're talking hours and hours and hours of research every week. And so we were talking about this yesterday with Aaron, and I can't remember. I think I don't remember what the exact question was, but it was basically like, so do we keep moving forward or do we throw in the towel? Or I think you might have said, like, well, I want to keep doing it, but if you don't, and I was like, wait a minute, wait, no. Like, I can't imagine not doing this podcast. And it's so ridiculous, but literally, like, I wake up at 6 a.m. to record these episodes and I look forward to it. Like when I go to bed at night, I'm like, oh my God, I can't wait to talk to Tara about blah, 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 blah. Because this is
Yeah.
really like the main time we get to talk because of our schedules and stuff. And I think I would be really sad and depressed if like I didn't have someone to talk about all this crazy bullshit with.
Yeah.
I would go literally, I would go crazy. I think this podcast kept me from like losing my damn mind. And
Exactly. And that was my point because when this conversation happened yesterday, it like threw me for a loop. And my first thought was, oh my God, maybe she doesn't want to do the podcast anymore. And it kind of got me down. And then you said, but I don't really want to stop. And I was like, okay, cool, because I love doing this. And it is therapeutic in a way to be able to get all this out. And it's this combination of I love the empowered feeling of knowing what's going on and actually not. I think it's worse to have your head in the sand. And my personal opinion is if you're not paying attention to what's going on in the world and you're not willing to stand up for what you believe in, then you don't have a fucking say in anything that's going on. And
yeah.
so, what have we been doing the last couple years? We have been speaking out about what we're passionate about. And so I have a very vested interest in what we're doing because I have a vested interest in the future of our country.
Because if you're not paying attention, and doing your own research, it's lies. Like I listen to people in my life that say things and I'm like, they have no idea. That has all been debunked. That is all a bunch of bullshit. Like Trump is racist, like things like that. And that's what happens when you step away from it. You're going to get all the nonsense. You're not going to know what's real, what's fake, what's the truth, what's, just completely false. And I, again, like I feel like when you wake up to it, there's no going back. There's no just like flipping a switch and turning it off.
Right. And I do want to say too, like living in Europe has given me such a fascinating perspective because everything that is happening in America, the way it's being portrayed here is the narrative of Trump as the evil dictator is like gospel here. And there is no one that's saying, no, here's what's really going on. And I have had countless conversations with people who are just, I get asked frequently, being the American, like, oh, who are you voting for? And when I say I'm voting for Trump, it turns into a conversation of how could you vote for a dictator? And then I have to explain what's really happening in America. And I'm seeing how the political narrative is so hijacked here.
Yeah.
And it shows the censorship, the global censorship about this election that everyone is so concerned in Europe that if Trump gets elected, that global we're all going to go into this war. And I'm like, it's the exact opposite. But I have had conversations with a couple people here who have said when they found out like I'm a Trump supporter, we're so glad we like Trump too. And this is coming from native Czechs. And then I want to listen to their opinion. And they're like, oh, the media, everything the media tells us is it's very censored here and it's very incorrect. And I'm like, it makes me so excited to be like, yes, some people are really going beyond just what we're being told by the MSM.
Hmm.
But I feel it just makes me feel even more like I need to share what's really going on.
Well, and I do feel like from the time we started this podcast to now, so many more people have like awakened to all the
Yeah.
bullshit.
Hmm.
And so it is moving in the right direction, I think. And it's like, me, I believe in divine timing and like all that kind of stuff.
Yep.
And it's funny because we had this whole conversation, and one of the thoughts in my mind was like, are we making an impact? Like, are we really
Right.
reaching people? Because it's so hard to know on a podcast because we're not hearing from everyone listening. We're putting stuff out there. We can see stats, but it's not like on social media where people can comment. Um, and so I was kind of like having this question in the back of my mind, like, are we even making an impact at all? Is anyone even like hearing what we're saying? And as I'm thinking this, I see this post and it was from Dolores Cannon. Did you ever
Yeah.
follow her back
Oh,
in the
I know.
day?
Yeah. I still
Yeah,
like follow stuff on YouTube.
I love her. I love the way she explains things. She's passed away now, but like I see her clips all the time. And I see this clip and she goes, someone had this same exact question. Like, you know, what if I can't convince people or wake people up or whatever? And it wasn't even about politics, but she was like, your job isn't to wake people up. She's like, there's people that are always going to be negative. They're always going to be looking, they don't want to see the truth. Your job is not to convince them of anything. She said, what you're here for is everyone that's in the middle, that's right on the line. They're teetering on the line, and something you say is going to activate them and wake them up. That's what you need to focus on. Forget the negative people, forget the people that are so, not willing to hear another opinion. You're just here to reach the people that want to know the truth but haven't yet found it. And I was like, oh my God, I felt like that was like my answer.
Yeah.
And we always think it's black or white, like one extreme or the other, but there are so many people that are very open and they want to hear different opinions. They just haven't had the opportunity. They haven't come across anyone to give them this information yet. And so I was like, I feel like that's where we're at. Like, that's the purpose of this podcast, in my opinion, or that's why we should keep going with it.
Yeah. And I agree with you. And I want to keep going with it. So I'm glad we're on the same page with that.
So basically, we had an existential crisis this
Yeah.
weekend, but we're going to
Yes.
keep going with it. But we're going to change it up slightly. So, and this we kind of talked before we started recording, but it's like you have your master's degree, you were very focused in like English and citing sources, and you're good at research and all that kind of stuff. And I am not. And I feel like I was forcing myself to be more like you, and you were forcing yourself to try to be more like me because I'm more like social media. I want to find clips. I want to hear like the pulse of regular people and forget what the, articles say. So we were both kind of like forcing ourselves to focus on things we didn't really want to focus on. But I didn't even realize that I was subconsciously like competing with your like intellect to try to, so I don't sound like an idiot, but I'm like, maybe I need to just sound like an idiot and need to just be myself and focus on social media,
Well,
and you focus on your academic intellect.
I sound like an idiot a good portion of the time.
No,
So
you don't.
no, I've gotten over that. It used to really bother me, and I would hear our episodes and I'd be like, fuck, what did you say that for? Or, I get my stats wrong, or I say million instead of billion, or the wrong day or month or year or whatever. And I totally don't care now because it's just that's life and that's being real and we don't edit anything. And I think I was listening to Joe Rogan interviewing JD Vance. Super long interview, by the way, but really good. Still not entirely done with it. But I can't remember which one of them. I think it was JD Vance. He fucked something up. And I was like, yes, like, it's not just me. If
Yeah,
Harvard or whatever, where did he? Stanford, Harvard, somewhere. He's like
one of those.
way more educated than me. Um, if he can fuck stuff up, then I can too. But
And
to your point with social media, I don't like it. I mean, I think that's very well known. I don't even scroll. I look at stuff every now and then, but it's just not my thing. And it's something that you're so fucking good at. And when a topic comes up where you're like, hey, I saw this on social media, I get the same feeling that you do when I bring up topics that I find research on. So I
And
think we
it's
can,
so interesting because we both get totally different topics.
yeah.
Like a lot of the stuff you'll find, I'll be like, I haven't heard a word about it, probably because it's being censored,
Mhm.
and so it is cool. But I think neither one of us realized it. I didn't until we were talking like literally this morning. And I'm like, okay, I just need to run with my strengths. You run with yours.
Yeah.
And I think instead of having more of this like rigid process, we're just going to do our own thing and come together on the podcast. And I think we'll both feel better about it because I'm not trying to force myself to read a bunch of articles where I'm like, oh my God, this is the last thing I want to do with my time right now.
And I will be the same with like, I do not want to scroll on social media.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think it'll be fun too, because we'll get to see different perspectives. You can kind of like fact check me because I know on social media there's a lot of shit that um is false, but at the same time, there's a lot of stuff that you're never going to find in an article. And so
Right.
it's like we'll have those two different takes. We're going to be making it more fun because I'm just focusing on what I enjoy, you're focusing on what you enjoy, and we're going to keep going with it. And I feel so much better because I like literally the thought of not doing this makes me depressed. Like it gives me a reason to wake up early. And I mean, what else can you say with that? Like that's a hell yes. We need to keep going with it. So with that being said, I did want to bring up a topic today. And you texted me about this, about Peanut the Squirrel. And you're like, we need to talk about Peanut the Squirrel. And to be honest, I hadn't heard anything about it. And I was like, are you fucking kidding me? Like, we're going to talk about a squirrel? And you're like,
Well,
oh my God, yeah, it's everywhere. I'm like, this is
yeah, but
stupid.
I have to say, I hadn't heard about it either. It was Erin that told me about it. And when she sent it to me, I had the same reaction that you had when I sent it to you. And I was like, are you fucking kidding me? She's like, no, no, this is a really big story. And so I watched the video and I was like, okay. And I realized this is like, even the MSM is talking about this shit.
Yeah. It's everywhere. There's so many memes, just like when Trump brought up like the Haitians eating the cats or whatever, and there were all those memes of like Trump with like cats surrounding him. Now it's like Trump with like the squirrel, and it's just like everywhere. But when you get into what actually happened, it is insane. So this guy, which I didn't even realize, I've seen this guy and his squirrel so many times on TikTok, and he had this squirrel named Peanut, and then there was this raccoon. And I don't know the full backstory, but what he said was he's like, I always tell people you should never have a squirrel or a raccoon as a pet ever. And he said, however, there are times where sometimes an animal cannot survive on their own. And that is where I chose to like take them in and they changed my life. And they did. Like this guy ended up like creating this whole farm, all because of this squirrel that he took in. And there's so many cute videos. Like the squirrel like lived in the house with him and his wife and like they would play and it was like it was really cute. And
I think he even said that they tried to release the squirrel into the wild. Like I guess its mom died somehow. I can't remember, was she hit by a car or something? I don't know. But they like rescued the squirrel and then tried to release it back into the wild, and the squirrel just came back to their house.
yeah, which like I don't know about you, but I had experiences like that as a child, like where
I
there
rescued
were
a squirrel.
bunnies. Yeah, like where like the mom is gone and they're, and you take them
This
in.
This happened to me because I was working at Disney and they were cutting down trees on the studio lot, like trimming the branches, and there was a squirrel's nest, and like three baby squirrels fell out of the nest. And I guess once at that, if something like that happens, the mom abandons them. So the mom didn't come back for the squirrels. And me and one of my office mates, we each decided to take a baby squirrel. And this thing was like literally a newborn. And I got a little box and put stuff in it, and I looked up, how to care for a squirrel, and like I think I fed it with a baby bottle. I don't know, this was so long ago. But I had the squirrel for maybe 3 weeks, and I kept it in the office in like a back room, but no one was supposed to know that we had these pet squirrels. And then they started getting really loud because squirrels cheep like super loud.
Really?
Yeah, really loud. And then there was no way of hiding it. And then we ended up taking him to a rescue.
Oh my God, that's funny. We had flying squirrels when I was a kid. My brother was like, we always had a different pet. We had so many reptiles. We had flying squirrels, which was pretty cool. And
Wow.
they don't really like fly, like they don't have wings, but
But they have those like
they,
bat arms, right?
yeah,
Yeah.
it's pretty cool. One of them, we in our basement, we had those like ceiling tiles that you can like punch
Hmm.
out or whatever. And one of the tiles was missing because we had like a flood or something. And my dad was down there. His office was in the basement. He's like typing on his computer and he hears like, and then he would stop and like look. He wouldn't hear it. And then he'd go back to work and he'd hear, and then he's like looking and out of that tile, he sees a little head like pop down, scared the hell out of him. But it was one of the flying squirrels that had escaped from their cage. But anyhow, yeah, like we've all had these experiences. Like it's not unusual that you rescue an animal. It's just this guy rescued it and then kept it. And I mean, it became a sensation. They have like 500,000 followers on TikTok. And so anyhow, what happened was out of the blue, no warning, his house gets raided. Okay. And what do you think of when you think of a raid? You think of like the FBI, right?
Of course. Yeah.
No, it was not the FBI. It was the Department of Environmental Conservation. That got my attention. That's when I was like, we need to talk about this on the podcast. Since when? You were in law enforcement. In your entire law enforcement career, have you ever come across a case where the Department of Environmental Conservation raids someone's home?
I would think they would have to be coordinating with a law enforcement agency. I don't know what the rules in New York are, but a raid is typically conducted by a law enforcement agency.
Yeah. Well, I guess they had to go through like they said four departments. I don't know what that means. I don't even know if that's police departments, government departments, but they had to go through four departments and they got a judge to sign off on this warrant where it was literally like a raid. The guy's like, you would think I was a drug dealer because they went in every cabinet. They made the wife and the husband stand outside If they wanted to use the bathroom, they had to have a police escort take them to their own bathroom. They were not allowed to feed their horses or any other animals breakfast or lunch
Wait, what was the raid for? Like, what was the
because
purpose of the raid?
they were in possession of wildlife.
So they're looking for wildlife in the cupboards?
Yeah, that's my point, okay? That is my point. Like, so now all of a sudden we have to worry about yet another government agency, the Department of Environmental Conservation. And I'm like, what are they going to do next? Go after people that are using gas powered, stoves and like, you know what I mean? Like lawnmowers. Like this is just insane. But they raided him just like you would raid, someone for human trafficking. But what's interesting is it's New York. They're letting rapists out on bail. They're not prosecuting criminals, but they will prosecute Donald Trump. They will go after a guy who has a pet squirrel. And the guy was like, think about all of the resources and taxpayer dollars that were used to send 10 to 12 men to this farm for the entire day and raid it. And then, like, what is the purpose of the raid? Okay, so like he's in possession of wildlife. So maybe they thought that this squirrel was in some sort of danger. So they're going to
Okay, I'm going
save
to
it.
interrupt you real quick because I had to look this up while you're talking, and
Yeah.
their Fox News did an article about this, and they said that the agency received complaints that wildlife was being kept illegally, and that's why they conducted the raid.
So that is a reason for a raid. Like, think about that. Wouldn't you just, I mean, I don't even know that that's worth a police officer coming to the home. Maybe you get a fine or a phone call, but like you're getting your whole home raided. And they were questioning like his wife's immigration status and
I
like
saw that.
just like crazy stuff. And so it's like if the purpose was to save this animal that should be in the wild, well, they did a pretty bad job about it because they euthanized it. They took the squirrel and the raccoon and they killed it.
Mhm.
What was the purpose of that? You used all these taxpayer dollars to go after this guy who rescued these animals and then you killed them.
Yeah, because the squirrel, I guess, bit one of the people involved in the raid. And so their excuse is they had to euthanize both the squirrel and the raccoon, who I guess the raccoon's name was Fred. And they euthanized both of them over the possibility of rabies. No, not even
Okay,
confirmation, just the possibility.
so you're gonna go to get a squirrel and a raccoon, and you're not gonna have protective gear. You're not,
Right.
you know what I mean? It's like the whole thing, none of it makes sense. It's so outrageous. And it's like totally a violation of this guy's freedom. This is his home. Like he owns this land, this farm, and they just went up in there and completely turned his house upside down, killed his animals. And we're all just supposed to be like, yeah, that's normal. I mean, what?
It's crazy. Okay, I'm going to totally go off the rails here on something unrelated, but you just made me think of this story. So, I actually got chased down by a raccoon once when I when I was a cop, and we had a radio call at someone's home and they had pet raccoons. And these motherfuckers were huge. I'm talking like these were dog-sized raccoons, and it's a late night. I was working graveyard shift, and we it was like a referral from another agency for they found someone's purse or something. I don't remember the details. But we go up to this house and there's like two feed bowls outside. And so my partner goes in and I'm behind him. And then I see them, right? I see the raccoons, and they're approaching the porch like very defensively, like, who are these people? And we go inside, and then my partner has me go get something from the car. I think I had to look at a message on the computer screen and like tell the other agency, yeah, this is the right house or something. So I go outside, and it's a long walk to the car. It's like down a long ass driveway. There's trees everywhere. I get out to the car. I come back, and the fucking squirrel, I mean, the raccoons are chasing me. I'm not kidding. I broke
God.
out into a fucking run because I was so scared because these raccoons are on my tail to the point where I like, there was two steps and then the door, and I somersaulted over the steps. I landed on my side on my gun, slammed into the door, ripped my pants, and my they come to the door and they're like, "We heard this commotion. What's going on?" Well, I didn't want to tell them like, "Oh, your raccoons frightened me," so I tried to quickly run into the house. And anyway, this is a stupid story, but suffice it to say that I got back to the station later on, and there was raccoon memes all over the station about me. And they had put my name instead of Manjekovic, Racoonovich,
Oh my
and like
God.
pictures of raccoons all over the station, which it was very funny. But at the time, I was very upset that I ripped my pants and I got chased by very angry raccoons.
That would be scary though, just getting chased
Mhm.
by especially an animal like that that is, they can carry diseases and you don't know.
But guess
Um,
what? Nobody raided their house
no one
afterwards.
raided their
And
house. They
and I
laughed
didn't,
about it.
yeah, I didn't file a complaint with the Department of whatever and raid their house and have their animals killed. So there you go.
Yeah, and I'm thinking like, did someone call in a tip like, "Oh, you have to save this squirrel." Well, guess what? Now the squirrel's dead. So good job. It's like have you ever seen National Lampoon's Christmas Vacation with the
Of course.
Griswolds and like the
Yes.
squirrel jumps out of the
Yeah.
tree? Yeah, so I come across, well, there's like so many memes. Like even Elon Musk, I think he posted like make squirrels great again, vote Trump or something.
He did. He posted President Trump will save the squirrels, and he had like a crying emoji face on it. The memes have been hilarious. I mean, even the Babylon Bee did a whole headline, like, one of their funny headlines about it. Like, this thing
Yeah.
is everywhere.
No, the best was on TikTok. This guy's like, imagine explaining this to your grandkids. Like, yes, the Civil War did finally break out. And yes, it was a squirrel. The squirrel was the straw that broke the camel's back, and we all revolted because it's
Mhm.
like so many people are outraged over a squirrel. But it's like just perfect for 2024 because so much outrageous shit has been happening. And it is a total violation of this guy's freedom. And it's like if they can come and raid your house over a squirrel, they can raid your house over anything. And this wasn't even a law enforcement agency. This was the Environmental Conservation Department. I mean, how crazy?
I guess he didn't have a license for the squirrel. Again, I'm just going off this Fox News article, and New York state law requires that if you are going to own a wild animal, you have to have a license for it. But this guy adopted the squirrel like 7 years ago. And I
And he
guess he
was in
was,
the process
yeah,
of getting
of,
whatever license you needed.
he wanted to get him certified as an educational animal. And
Yeah,
like you said, this squirrel had like 500,000 followers on social media.
yeah.
Like, wouldn't you? I'm sorry. Before, from my police perspective, anytime you would do any kind of raid or serve a warrant, you always do your homework beforehand and you find out everything you need to know about the location you're going and the people that live there. And wouldn't you think someone would have done their research and said, oh, these people own a squirrel that's like a huge social media sensation. Um, Maybe we ought to talk about how we're going to handle this instead of
Yeah.
going in, raiding the place, and then like you have to know there's going to be social media backlash for something like this that's going to go viral.
I mean, can you just imagine being in that room and they're all sitting there prepping for this raid and they're like, okay, you go in and look for the squirrel and you're gonna, it's like, is this Ace Ventura Pet Detective? I mean, it's so ridiculous. Meanwhile, like crime is crazy in New York. We're not going to go after rapists. We're going to let everyone out on bail. And I think that's the other thing. It's not just like this guy's freedom being violated. It's just like what is going on when you're in a state where criminals are running free, where there's illegal migrants everywhere. You're going to use your resources to go get a squirrel. I
Yeah.
mean, what in the hell? Like, I think that's just the icing on the cake for this year.
Well, that's the thing. When Aaron first sent me this story and I saw the guy's video, and my first thought was like, I know we talk about living in the Twilight Zone all the time, but it was like the last straw of me just being like, what the fuck is going on in our country? That
Yeah.
this is it's we're 2 days away from an election, and there is this controversy over this absolutely asinine thing that happened that, like you just said, we have crime running rampant in New York City, and resources are focused on a fucking animal rescue for
Yeah.
two pets
And
that
weren't you
are.
just talking about this on a recent episode on how they're cutting like all sorts of resources in New York
Yeah,
because
yeah.
of the illegal
Hmm.
migrants? And
Billions of
yet,
dollars.
why wouldn't they cut the Department of Environmental Conservation? You know what I mean? It's like I don't think they have their priorities straight in New York City. It's like we're going to prioritize a squirrel over crime. Like the
Yeah.
whole thing is just it's just so outrageous, but it's getting everyone's attention. And this is waking people up. I'm telling you, like it's such a nonsense thing, but I think it's showing people this is what happens when these agencies have this much power and resources. They can just do whatever the fuck they want.
With what's what you even have one of the Congress members from New York who represents the 23rd district. He's like demanding an investigation into this whole thing, and he's like, I want answers about what happened.
Yeah, I want answers too. Like when does this department get the authority to conduct a raid? I mean, my God,
Well, he even
crazy.
said it was Nick Langworthy, and he said that Governor Kathy Hochul, however the fuck you pronounce her name, needs to answer people's questions because they're not saying anything. The DEC isn't saying anything, and there's nothing coming out of the government as to like why this raid was conducted this way. Because again, even if you get a complaint from a neighbor or
Right.
whomever, you're not going to go into a full scale raid like this.
Yeah.
It's just insane.
Yeah. No, like it is insane. I mean, that's something I would think you have to really go through a lot of approvals because of the cost of it and all the
Mhm.
resources. And then on top of that, like what if this guy was armed and didn't like thought like his house was being overtaken
Right.
by criminal, like this could have gone so wrong. And to do that over like a squirrel, it doesn't make sense. And if there were more to the story, okay, well then why isn't the governor or anyone speaking up about it and saying like that's not actually what happened? But they're not probably because they know this was a shit show and they're like trying to do damage control now before they give a public statement.
Yeah, they're not because believe me, I checked. I checked to see what was in the news about this, and there is nothing coming from the government of New York.
Oh my God. Crazy, crazy, crazy. I didn't think this story was going to be worth much when you first told me, but oh my God, did it open up a lot of questions. And I think it's waking a lot of people up. And once again, the Trump campaign seems to be having a great time with
Yeah.
it because like, good God, there's so many memes everywhere you look. So yeah, Peanut the Squirrel, rest in peace. Sorry, our government killed you, executed
Yeah.
you. Like, how terrible.
And your cousin, Frank the raccoon.
Yeah, so sad. Well, that was a nice break, though, I must say, from talking about the election and polling, because I just can't. And there's no telling. And are we even going to do an episode on Wednesday or are we going to just do one on Friday? What do you think?
I guess we'll kind of see what happens over the next day or so because, like we've talked about, I don't think all the fucking mail-in votes and whatnot are going to be counted. And if states are allowed to count stuff days after the election, I don't know. Part of me thinks it's going to be, it's like I know Trump's going to win, but then in the back of my mind, it's like how much fraud is going to take place. And we're really not going to know until after tomorrow. So I guess we have to play it by ear and see what happens.
Yeah. Well, if anyone has not voted at this point, make sure you go tomorrow and cast your vote because this is, I think, the most important election of my lifetime. So,
Yep.
yeah, we'll see you either Wednesday or Friday. We'll play it by ear, see what's going on. But I hope you enjoyed this episode. And yeah, we're going to change it up and have fun with it and see how it goes. So, thanks everyone for tuning in and have a good week.